Narratives are the overarching stories we internalize that are created from a combination of smaller stories we hear every day, from the media, arts, and social interactions. These narratives shape our views, opinions, and assumptions of the greater world and of ourselves. We have an opportunity to be strategic in shaping understanding by creating and sharing new stories that are authentic and asset-based.
We have partnered with Be Great Together, the Convergence Partnership, and Assemble to create DocuCourse with the intention of telling inspiring stories from community changemakers as an effort to change narratives. We hope that by listening to these changemakers and by following the training guides, viewers will create their own stories and build new narratives as they work to change their communities.
So what is DocuCourse? DocuCourse is where we take community stories and combine it with community strategies to inspire community change. And it's all from the perspective of community change makers who are actually out there doing the work day by day. We believe that most people want to make a difference, but sometimes we just need a better understanding of the issues out there. And then we need a little guidance on where to get started. So grab your popcorn and notepad, sit back, relax, and enjoy DocuCourse.
He became somewhat controlling, telling me I couldn't go here or there.
People responding kind of in spurts, like I only have this long to endure this pain, or when this happens, I'll get out of it.
When I got with her, then he was no longer able to do the physical damage.
All of a sudden, out of nowhere, we were surrounded. They put my son, who had never been in trouble a day in his life, in handcuffs. I was so worried.
66% of women who are held pretrial are mothers, of Black women held are mothers. What does the system look like that really decides justice in the way that we envision it?
What gives me fulfillment in my community is seeing people not give up, seeing people come together. I think that gives me a lot of fulfillment. I had been doing radio for a number of years, and it was getting close to graduation when I got this assignment to cut a PSA, public service announcement, for a local domestic violence organization. But then afterwards, my friends and I, we talked about, like, we laughed, no lie, we laughed and we joked about, you know, I wouldn't be in this situation. That could never be me. Why doesn't she leave this situation? Like, those were the things that we were saying to each other, and really kind of belittling this person who needed support, because we were just thinking to ourselves, oh, that could never be me. I would never allow somebody to just abuse me. You can never say never, is what I'll say. I graduated high school and decided to attend Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. It's an HBCU and an all-girls school. While in college, I eventually met a guy that I fell for. He was funny, smart, very charismatic. We both enjoyed, like, he was a history buff. Like, he minored in history, and I loved that. I loved that he was a double major. I was like, okay, he's really taking his education seriously. I had done radio, and he was over working at his campus's radio station. So that was like a thing that really brought us together. Eventually, though, I didn't recognize it at the time, He became somewhat controlling, telling me I couldn't go here or there. He didn't want me to go here or there, or he didn't want me to go with certain friends. And honestly, at the moment, I felt like, this guy's looking out for me. He's looking out for my safety. He's concerned about, my well-being. I didn't see it as controlling in the moment. And that was, it was a really big red flag that I missed.
When it comes to isolation, you isolating someone from their family, their contacts, their community, making them solely reliant and dependent on another person, creating more of a gaslighting space where the person can be manipulated into believing that they're the ones who are crazy. They're the ones who don't understand how the world works or how relationships work or what secure attachment is. And by isolating a person, you kind of cut off the availability for that person to have critical thinking or even have analytical thought around which way their life should move.
So, eventually the relationship went from controlling to physical. I was out with a friend one night. We were at a pool hall, and we happened to see him there, and I was happy to see him there, but I noticed he wasn't happy to see me there. And when I talked to him, he didn't want me to be at a pool hall. So I left. My friend took me home. At the time, I was staying with my sister, and got home, closed and locked the door, and the next thing I know, I'm hearing like all of this commotion at the front door. And when I go check things out, like, he has completely taken the door off the hinges. He has busted down my sister's door. And he grabbed me and assaulted me. The neighbors heard everything and they called the cops. And the cops came. And I remember the cops had me and him together, and they looked at me and they said, "What happened?" And in that moment, I felt stuck. I felt like I can't really say what happened. Like, I'd be snitching on him in front of his face. Like, this is not gonna end well for me. This is not gonna be good for me. And so I didn't say anything. It was actually the neighbors who told the cops what happened. But it makes me think about like the choice I made. I felt like I didn't really have a choice. Was I really gonna tell the cops in front of him, yes, he did this to get him in trouble, to get him locked up? And then what? It was a lot of processing in a very short amount of time that I did. And I made the decision that I thought would keep me safe.
So when someone calls in a domestic violence complaint to the police, whoever the responding officer is, in many jurisdictions, at least previously, would not have been trained in intimate partner violence and understanding the dynamics that occur between a perpetrator and a victim in these scenarios, and what they should expect when they get there, how they should question folks, what the dynamics, how they need to separate people, right? Is there a safe place to put people? And we know that based on who's making the phone call, people have different responses to it, right? They, rightly or wrongly in many scenarios, right, they are biased in how they're responding. And if we don't train people to be aware of their own biases, to understand the nuances in intimate partner violence, we're just putting more and more people at risk and putting police into a situation to respond with skills they don't have. But most of the folks who have experienced abuse don't phone it in. And the reasons for that is what is going to happen when you do, right? If you do make that phone call, if you do call the police, based on how they respond, you're putting yourself at risk.
You will see the perception of how a person can literally have children, and if the If the perception is that the person's not doing their job as a mother, or if they're not doing it in the eyes of the law enforcement the way, then they're often the one who is reprimanded. They're often the one who is not listened to. Law enforcement's involvement when they show up and are not listening to the victim oftentimes doubles down in the hopelessness of that victim and feeling that there is no help, and makes them feel more isolated and more manipulated in those situations.
After I had endured as much as I could, I started making plans to get out of the relationship. I realized that I couldn't change this person and that I really needed to get and be somewhere safe. Shortly after that, I found out I was pregnant. Then I started to reconsider, because yet again, I don't want to raise a child by myself. I want my child's father to be involved in their life. I didn't want to have this broken home. And so I tried again to make it work. The emotional abuse was still happening. The verbal abuse was still going on, so much so that I went into labor, arguing with him. So I started looking into, where can I get some help from? And I found out about these orders of protection. I'll never forget being in the courtroom and the judge was there and I was there and he was there with his attorney and the judge just making small talk with him and talking about the football game, and it was inappropriate. And it made me feel so small, honestly. And, even his mother testified that, yes, she says, yes, Your Honor, he has been abusive to her. And I felt like, okay, even though that happened, she stood up for me in this moment. And the judge's verdict was, I've heard everything, but I'm gonna give this young man another chance to get it right. I was crushed. I didn't get an order of protection. I didn't get anything that I needed that day. And so I remember leaving court and I remember seeing him and he said something really foul to me. I won't repeat it. And I was just thinking, it's never gonna stop.
In my experience with women that have had to deal with the courts, oftentimes they hold the mother in contempt. they hold the victim in contempt. How they hold the victim in contempt is by stating that while they are being subjected to abuse, they have put themselves in a situation where abuse can occur. Therefore, they are meaning to be there. They are literally choosing to be there. We often hear in these court cases where the opposite attorney will ask the question, well, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you go? Oftentimes, there's the expectation that if someone is supposed to escape domestic violence, that they should have a job, the availability to have a job, a house, and all of the things that they could not get and was kept from them from their abuser. The court does not take into the account of the amount of manipulation and the influence that the abuser has had on the person's life. And they act like they're just coming into the case just like as if it just happened yesterday. So you obviously chose to be here in this situation. Therefore, we're gonna give him another chance and see if he can do better or they can do better, but still subjecting you to the same amount of abuse that you did not feel that you could escape beforehand.
He started to weaponize the courts against me. He would start filing all kinds of legal proceedings because one of the things that I stopped doing was to protect myself was in the child custody exchange, like going to a public place, making sure that I can't be alone with him so he doesn't have an opportunity to do some of the things that he was doing. And that like really angered him. With the weaponization of the courts, they use this out-of-date term, parental alienation, to basically take custody from protective parents. Parental alienation is a claim that a parent has poisoned a child against a parent to so that there is no relationship. But in my case, every that was just so untrue. I have bent over backwards to make sure that there was a relationship, even to the detriment of my own safety at times. In those court orders that were sent to me, they would tell me threat of arrest. And to a mama like me who just wants to take care of my child, that was so scary. It was more than scary, it was frightening. To think that I would be jailed.
So in a system where you have adversaries, the side with more power and more resources is more likely to win, not the side of justice and truth. The victim now has to not only have resources to survive on their own, they have to have resources to fight this battle in court and be able to keep their children, for example. So the way it's designed really allows anyone with power to be able to use it oppressively if the other person doesn't have equal power.
When I got with her, then he was no longer able to do the physical damage. So then he just used the courts to harass her about her son, because he knew that at the end of the day, it's pretty much the only thing that can really hurt her, per se, if you mess with her child. You know what I mean? Any woman, mess with a woman's child, that's gonna be a problem. So he just used the courts to manipulate her, keep her in court. His parents had money, so they could afford to keep him in court and buy a lawyer for this stuff and everything. And so, yeah, he did that, and he pretty much harassed his son.
I couldn't get help from the courts. I couldn't get help from the places that say they're there to help somebody in my situation. And I started making plans to go home, to come back. He had made a claim to keep me in a state that he didn't even live in, just so he could control me. And I thought it was wild that it could even happen. But thankfully, the judge saw fit to let me and my son come to Kansas City where I could get the support that I needed. And I'm really grateful for that. If that hadn't happened, I don't know if I would be here.
When she had my kid, so I wouldn't be with my kid because I didn't have that experience when I was growing up. So I moved to Kansas City with her. Now you keep in mind, all this abuse, she's still keeping this boy and his father together. She's still doing this. She's getting abused like another. Like she's crying at night. She's getting abused. But she's still on the course, which I was finding so commendable, but it's frustrating to see. So I got this house in Missouri, and then I had an opportunity to buy a house in Kansas. And I was buying a house for her. I didn't want to put it in her name before she got all this stuff straight with the boy. And it was like a safe house because now she's in Kansas, don't nobody know where she at. Anything he does, he's going to do it in Missouri. He don't know she's even in Kansas. He don't even know where she's at this time. And so, yeah, she was pretty much underground for 10 years.
I found a group of other protected parents who had been through a lot of the same things that I had gone through, and all of them, every single one of them, was going through not only legal abuse, but also financial abuse. And because of both of those things coupled together, it really left people in very desperate situations.
The differences between the amounts of abuse when you talk about violence is the fact that you have physical violence, you have financial abuse, where withholding someone's money, their availability to move, removing someone's clothing, taking all their clothing and making it unavailable for them to leave the home. Self-neglect, purposely ensuring that they stay in a place of victimhood so that the other person has to attend to them or continues to be attached to them in a dysfunctional way.
I would hear mamas in the group talk about going back because it was potentially the safer option or potentially a more sound financial option. I heard mamas talking about, I can do 18 years. I can do these 18 years for my kid.
Having that community allows them to be able to see what it is to have support, to see what it is to be validated, to be heard, to be listened to, respected, and to also help navigate what it is to be a survivor.
Even though I had found this online community of people who were in similar situations, it was still a very lonely time for me. And people, most people don't realize that survivors, people in these situations, are doing a lot of things to try to stay safe, including not work. I was afraid that my name would be out there, somebody would recognize me. You're just afraid of being able to be tracked down. You don't want people to be able to find your address. And so I wouldn't fill things out. I mean, I was homeschooling the kids. I was nervous about who they were playing with. I didn't even let my daughter tell people her real name because I was doing everything I could to keep myself and my family safe. I don't think people really understand the minds of some abusers who are relentless. This man follow my activities around the country, from one state to another. He would tell me what I'm wearing. He would tell me things that nobody should know.
My goal was to try to keep Jelani around as long as possible. Because I wanted to, I knew eventually that his father was going to get him. And I was kind of coaching him about his father in a gentle way without not trying to talk bad about his father to him, because that's not correct either. Even though he knows his father's bad, I'm not trying to say bad things about him, but I'm trying to tell him about how people are and who he is, you know what I'm saying? And no matter what goes on, this is who he is. This is what he should do, no matter what you hear. And you know, and to go along, sometimes you have to go along to get along, to get through, you know? And yeah, it was a sad day when they got him, though. It was a sad day.
For mamas who are really thinking about their children, then they're like, it's not so bad. I can do this for my child. I can do these 18 years. But I understand when you get no legal support, you have no community support, you have no finances, and your abuser is telling you all you have to do is come back home. Some mamas take the option and they go back home.
When we talk about stages of change, there's 5 stages. There's pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and there's always a chance for relapse. Within that is what I call the rock bottom myth, which is often what happens in domestic violence, where people respond in kind of in spurts, like I only have this long to endure this pain, or when this happens, I'll get out of it. The thing is with that is that you often continue to dig the hole deeper in the aspect of getting to a place where you have less availability to leave. The hole just got deeper, so then you add on. Okay, I'll leave in 10 years. Okay, I'll leave in 3 years. Okay, I'll leave in 1 year. Okay, I'll leave when he hits my son. I'll leave when he, if it gets to this point. But it's the belief in your mind that there is no way out, so therefore there is almost time to be served, and if that time that is served, then you'll be able to leave the situation or an opportunity will present itself. But it never puts in place the capacity for actually planning, safety planning, and being able to leave the situation. It only plans for the endurance of the situation, not the elopement of it.
I really didn't pay too much thought to it when I was a child, because I didn't really see my dad as being that person. So it was kind of just like a back burner in my head, like, okay, he's done this or that, but maybe he's still not the same person, type of thing. That's a really big thing with my mom, is just having a good relationship with your family.
Only time I really started to think that something was different is when my mom would tell me not to tell someone my name, or when Jelani would call his dad and mom had this little recorder that she wanted him to use all the time, and she would ask me to go get it. That's when I kind of thought things were weird. But other than that, everything really seemed normal. Nothing out the ordinary for me.
It was really important to me to try to make things as normal as possible for, my son and for my daughter in the house. But we were also very clear that we were going to have some hard conversations with my son. Because of all of the research I had done and the circles I had been in at that point, and listening to professionals at this point, I'm at the point where I'm now engaging with professionals, I knew that I had to equip my son with some tools in case something happened.
So it is important for anyone who is going through intimate partner violence, domestic violence, family violence to have a safety plan. Making sure that a safety plan for her son, hey, this may happen. This will happen. If this does, this is what we can do in this situation. Planning is important. Contemplation without preparation creates ineffective action. So having a safety plan in place ensures that when it's time to act, that everyone remains safe, especially when it comes to your children, especially when it comes to you.
As scary as it was, I mean, I didn't want to have this conversation, but I'm glad I did. And you know, Ak and I, we just really coached my son. Definitely be respectful, and you know, try to do what you're told. I just didn't want him to be harmed for not being, you know, obedient as a child.
Respect women.
Be safe. If you can't call us from the home you're in, use a friend's phone.
Be a helpful person, you know, and be mindful and think of others.
Contact me on social media.
Throughout it all, he had a family, and we loved him.
Use Signal, you know, I think he even used Snapchat eventually. Snapchat, Instagram, just a way for us to talk or try to communicate with each other so that I could have some kind of semblance of what was happening with him.
And if he ever needed us, he can call and we will come.
You know, email me. So these are some of the things that we taught him to do in case he was separated from us for any reason. It wasn't too long, you know, after that he was taken. And one of the things that he did when he was able to call me was say, "Mom, I remembered everything you told me." I was so worried. I was so worried. And I hadn't heard from him. But he did what we taught him. And that is, when you are safe and when you can call, do, even if it's just for a minute. And the first thing he said was, "I remember everything you taught me. Don't worry."
For them to be able to say things seem normal for the most part is two-tier. One, the fact that they can acknowledge the experiences that they've gone through, but also can see where the amount of attachment that they had with their mother and the normacy that was put around that, in a sense of what is safe and what is not safe. Well, how do we keep ourselves safe? If that secure attachment occurs, it can help a person cope with the adverse childhood experiences that they have. And it's not so much as that it seems normal, but rather it was something that was not as traumatic. It dilutes the trauma because you have a secure place. You have a safe space in a person.
One day I took Jelani to the library, and this is kind of odd for me because I drove him. Which is out of the protocol really for our safety. I didn't drive because if there was a potential for me to get stopped, run my name, if something comes up, you know, I could get in trouble. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, we were surrounded by like huge guys, big burly guys. And one of them grabbed my son. They told me a judge had signed this order and they were taking my son. They put my son, who had never been in trouble a day in his life, in handcuffs and put him in a police car and drove him away. Apparently, my ex had went to a judge in North Carolina and got full custody of him. They had a billboard of my son as if he was a missing and exploited child, and he was not. And so on the ride back to the safe house was the hardest, longest drive. And I did not have my son when I walked in their house.
Systemic racism is a very real thing, and it occurs in every system, which includes the criminal legal system. And we can see it at outcomes, right? When we're talking about bail, the folks who are held and incarcerated, you know, the vast majority of folks who are in jail right now are held pretrial. They haven't been proven guilty, but they're being held. And the majority of those folks, 43% of all people who are held pretrial, are Black, even though Black folks only make up about 14% of the US population. When we think about the criminal legal system, one of the things we have to think about is who decides justice, right? And the process starts with police. Well, who are police? Predominantly white officers. They make the arrest, they bring it to the prosecutor, who's going to decide whether or not to charge and whether or not to offer a signature bond or just a release. And who are prosecutors in America? Predominantly white men. Then they're going to take that to a judge, who again, is probably going to be a white man. And if they have to go before a jury, even if now we may have women in this scenario, we're looking again at predominantly white folks. And you add to that the fact that, let's say someone even has counsel. Let's say someone like a Black mother who's been arrested now has a public defender supporting her. The vast majority of public defenders are also white folks. And so what you have is a system that every step of the way is not designed to understand or include the experience of the very person who's going through it. And so that's what leads us to the outcomes that we have, where you know, Black women in particular are isolated and their experience not understood by the system that's then, you know, instituting a punishment against them.
She took all that abuse for her son Jelani. Like, she really took, I mean, I really can't put it into words how much mental abuse this dude did to her. You know, like, and as we sitting here right now, I tear up and I get upset thinking about it, you know, because she's such a good person.
You know, I took it really hard. The years going on, I have fell into a depression, and I kind of was just stuck in that. I guess it was just kind of lonely, really lonely in the house. You know, all of us are really close, and so, you know, every single day we talk to each other about something new, and I don't know, it just kind of got lonely in the house.
The fact that 66% of women who are held pretrial are mothers, of Black women held are mothers. If we want to change that outcome, we have to ask ourselves, what does the system look like that really decides justice in the way that we envision it? And certainly that would mean we have to have representation at all of these levels.
What did we do wrong? Like, how did this happen? And I pinpointed to me a conversation that I had with somebody that I trusted, and they basically turned me in. It was definitely hurtful because it came from a friend who I thought was trying to help me keep my family safe.
I was more encouraging her to go out there and find something to do and activate her mind else on other things than that. And after about a year, then she was kind of out freely, because I kept, every time she got down, I kept pumping that into her head, like, hey, you can do all these things. Why are you gonna waste it now? You're free. You gotta realize the blessing in the disaster. You know what I'm saying? Now you're free. We done did all we can. We done got him to 13. We done did all we can. She came to that, and she walked in the house one day, and she was like, I'm ready. She just was like, I'm ready. I was like, okay. So I found a group to go deal with. I'm gonna see what I can do. And she started with the group, and the rest is history. She started becoming justice.
I started with doing safety planning for survivors because safety plans are unique. And so we started doing that. We started doing evidentiary affidavits, making sure that we could capture evidence for people if they needed it later on, even if they weren't going to leave right away. We started holding important documents for people, Social Security cards, birth certificates, things that you don't think about when you're leaving.
She still was every week checking the internet to see what you look up her name, what comes up. Does it come up where she's at, what she's doing? And she's an adapter. So once you adapt to that, then it becomes normal, So I had to keep reassuring her that what she was doing now, at this point forward, was the normal part. And the part that she just left was the abnormal part, was the problem. Like, that was not supposed to be happening. You know what I mean? I had to try to boost her up with that, and keep in mind, man, this is just me and Justice this whole time. Like, it's always just been me and Justice. So, if I didn't boost her up, who would?
I think that it's hard for a person to survive something without being able to see what it looks like to live on the other side of it.
The 13 years of isolation was a lot to deal with because I was not able to have deep, meaningful relationships with people in ways that I would want to.
I think that what helped me adjust the most would be the friends that I met while I was in Charlotte. I met some pretty good friends, and some of them actually had similar background to me, so just being able to talk about that with friends just made a world of a difference.
Avrell Justice Network was really getting into the community more. I met a brother named Montego who talked to me about bailing mamas out of jail. And, he was telling me about an organization, a national organization, and they help free Black mamas. There's an amazing organizer named Mary Hooks, and she came up with this idea. She's like, we got a bunch of our siblings, a bunch of our sisters, a bunch of Black women sitting in jail. What would it look like to go pay their bail?
Here. I think Ava's gonna have you right here. And I think I might actually just put the microphone on the seat here.
Okay.
And I started working with National Bailout to organize our first bailout in Kansas City.
Right here.
We seen how if mama's in jail, and it's a simple thing, mama's in jail for 2 or 3 weeks and come out and the whole world has been changed in 2 or 3 weeks.
We talk about maybe a survivor being arrested with her abuser because the cops can't figure out who's the aggressor.
Then you go to jail. While in jail, you have a bond. You can't pay it.
A couple of days is all it takes, really, to send a family spiraling downward. The moment that she's not reporting to work is a problem. And so a day or two of work that's missed usually ends with them being fired.
In this time, kids been taken.
Without that full check, there is no chance of paying the rent. And so missed rent equals potential eviction.
You get released. Mind you, your kids are gone in CPS. Everything that you work for, gone. You come home to nothing.
And when that happens, they're now couch surfing. They're looking for somewhere to stay. And so, you can see this downward spiral of things. And here is another opportunity for another agency to come in, like Child Protective Services. Or, unfortunately, the abusers themselves sometimes get the children. Maybe they're able to post bond and they can get out.
Survivors have to operate when they're concerned about their abuser being able to find them and see them, operate in this really isolating, invisible world. They can't leave a trace behind that someone could find them and possibly continue to abuse them. So they can't establish that, that permanent residence, right, where someone could then find them. And if they get the benefits, then they're now searchable there. And even if they are, by some strange world, able to get somewhere to live, establish benefits, and get it, if they save, right? If they're able to save to try to do the things they need to get their children back, well, then they're no longer eligible for benefits. And so it keeps people in a cycle of poverty and a cycle of oppression that can often then result in other kinds of criminal charges that come back. So it is just an entire cycle that just keeps going.
It was very clear to us, even beginning, that we had to do something to keep them out. Not just bail them out, but what can we really do to keep them out? And so that meant we had to address some other needs. So being able to access housing support, mutual aid with food, clothing, some of those things. But some of the other things were also legal support. Getting, It's very challenging trying to defend yourself in those situations. And so one of the things that I say all the time, especially for the group, is let there be no barrier. What's the barrier? Let's break it.
So we have to consider the impact of what this means on a family, right? On the bonds that exist between a parent and their child. So when a mother is incarcerated, even if it's just pretrial, if she's been the sole provider, her children are going to go somewhere. If she's been isolated from her family, that can mean her children may go into foster care, which then will put her on a cycle of being observed by the system when she does come home of whether or not she can keep her children. Once children have been removed, it's not so easy to just get them back.
After 5 years, when Jelani turned 18, I was able to see him. I went to his graduation in North Carolina. And so I was definitely like, how, what does he look like? How big is he? I was going through all of these things as I was, as we were preparing ourselves to go. The security guard, he asked me, he says, "You're Jelani's mother?" And I said, "Yes." And he just started telling me the most beautiful things a mama would want to hear about their son. He told me how respectful my son is, how mature he is, how dedicated he was to his studies, and that over the years, he was there to witness my son make good decisions. You think about what your kids are doing when you're not around. They could be acting up and doing stuff. They could be doing anything. But my child was somewhere doing what he was supposed to be doing.
He was 18, and he was able to come see his mother and talk to him and realize he was smart enough and strong enough to know he can come see his mother now at this point. Now I thought she was more mentally free, she didn't. Now it was a story of the past, not a present story,
As much as it hurt me to leave him there after the few weeks that we were there, I did. And I was so distraught. And I didn't let my son or even the other children see that. But this is just my personal, private conversations with Ak. And he kept reassuring me. He was like, he'll come home. He'll come home when he's ready. And it wasn't long before he called me. It was maybe a few weeks, and he said, "Mom, I'm ready to come." I quickly bought a plane ticket and got him on the plane, and we went and picked him up from the airport and brought him home.
At the heart of this is whether or not an adversarial system is designed to provide justice for families. That's not what our system is designed to do. The criminal legal system is being asked to resolve this issue when it's not looking at that. It's looking at punishment, punitive, right? How do we punish someone for their actions that are being done, and not how do we make people whole? How do we keep families whole? And the process to that is entirely different, and we have to ask ourselves, what does the world look like if we create that process that centers families?
We went to the music store one day, and he picked out a guitar. And he went home and he started teaching himself how to play. It was kind of a release, kind of a way for him to express himself, a way for him to kind of purge all these things that he was going through. And honestly, you could hear it in the music in the house. Like, it's kind of hard to describe, but he would play all night long. If we truly want to support Black mamas and babies, we need to consider like housing and affordable housing. Right now, I think in the city, they're talking about $1,400 is affordable for rent. Not for the Black mamas that I bail out, and not for most of the people who live in the city, to be honest with you. There are many people who couldn't afford that.
So housing itself is a barrier that people have to overcome to be successful and bring their family together, either after they have left prison for some sort of criminal term, or while they're waiting for their charges to happen if they're out on release. But when people come out of prison, they don't have the things you need to get a house. Where's your credit history? Where's your employment history? Where's the money for a down payment, right? For your deposit, for your rent? Those things aren't there. And so when folks are then not able to secure the housing, they don't have a place where they can either get their children back or remain out on probation or parole because they're shown as not establishing themselves, even though the fact that we incarcerated them took away the very tools they need to establish themselves to meet the requirements we're putting on them.
The thing that's concerning for me is that I see the jails being used to substitute mental health support instead of offering real mental health support to these Black mamas.
So when we talk about mental health, we're talking about their mental well-being. We're talking about maintaining their wellness. And to be a part of any system that does not, or to be subjected to any system that does not take into part the wellness of a person holistically, whether it be mental, physical, or emotional, or just all the above, financial, in all the ways that a person can be abused, it doesn't help solidify a person's belief that they can be well. It often at times they tend to believe that they deserve the amount of wellness that they are getting.
I'm seeing a powerful shift around this work. And now the conversation is more like, okay, what did actually happen? And how can we make it better? The conversation has shifted from blaming Black mamas for this situation to now being more solution-based. People are now taking more of an interest in mass incarceration. People are now taking more of an interest in what's really going on with Black mamas, specifically.
Participatory defense is the idea that an individual shouldn't have to navigate the system alone because it impacts the entire community. So how can the community support that individual and participate in what that system is doing? It can look like a variety of things. One of the biggest is just simply the community showing up at the hearings, at bail proceedings, and saying, we're here, we support this person. And providing insight into the fact that what you're going to do to this individual is going to impact all of us, and you need to think about that when you make these decisions.
Now, participatory defense is a community-based model, which allows regular community people to show up in powerful ways for Black mamas. Just think about a Black mama having to go to court on a court date and maybe face whatever charges against her and having to do so alone. Participatory defense is our power. It's our way of showing up for the person who needs us. Judges aren't used to community members just coming in and observing. They're not. And that's what participatory defense is. It's making sure that the judge didn't violate this person's rights, making sure that the judge knows we have a community of people who support this individual who's standing in front of you. They're not alone.
So until we address all of these issues, racism, poverty in America, we're not going to be able to reform the criminal legal system because it has to take those issues into account. It cannot view the world through one lens and just say that will be justice, not when we have a diverse country.
This right here is specifically for Black mothers today because we have historically had to buy our freedom. And so, in the spirit of our ancestors, in the spirit of what we had to come through, and because we disproportionately in the prison systems and the jail systems, we are focusing on Black mamas today. I just want to say thank y'all to everybody who's been supporting us. This is why we do this. She does not need to be in that jail. Nobody does.
No.
And so thank y'all for supporting the work that we're doing. Come on, sis, let's get you to a safe space.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning into DocuCourse, where we give stories and strategies for change. At DocuCourse, we always say we believe most people want to make a difference. Sometimes you just need a better understanding of the issues out there, and then you need some practical guidance on where to get started. And so with Bells and Buns in particular, please go to DocuCourse.org. There's actually more content, more strategies for change that you will have the opportunity to view. Before we get started, we want to give a special thank you to our partners at the Health Forward Foundation, Convergence Partnership, and Assemble.fyi. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to our featured Changemaker, Justice Gasson. Justice, thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Glad to be here.
So before we get started, you'll see a survey momentarily in the chat. We would love to hear from you. It's just 3 simple questions. We'd love to get the feedback from the audience. So, Justice, one of the things that I've heard people comment on when it comes to Bells and Buns is the 10 years of isolation. And so we heard in general comments around that 10 years of isolation, but from your personal perspective, can you take us into a deeper dive of your experiences within that 10 years of isolation, as well as coming out of that?
Yes, that is the crux. Isolation is meant to keep you silent, to keep you quiet, and to literally steal your power. And I felt like all of those things were happening when I was going through my situation. And for me in particular, somebody who loves my community, who loves to be a part of things, to know that I had to be over here and be small and be quiet was so hard to do and so soul crushing. It definitely impacted my mental health. It impacted me personally. It's also the reason why I go so hard now because I have had to be quiet for such a long period of time. But the safety of my family was tied to that. And so that was the decision that I was forced to make. But it is incredibly difficult to live in that space and to operate in that space and to try to raise a family in a space of isolation.
You know, one of the things that you just said that really caught my attention is disempowerment. And it's one thing, obviously, when you're going through the circumstances of intimate partner violence, and there's a disempowerment that happens within that. But you talked a lot about the weaponizations of the courts when it comes to disempowerment. So the systems that are meant to protect. And so I think even for those who may have seen this, weaponization of the courts can still be a vague term. Can you really break down what does that mean by weaponization of the courts, and how is that used to disempower survivors?
Sure, I can break that down. In my case, and in many of the situations that I have run across, it simply means that our abuser is continuing to file documents to have us come to court. And you all know, as we can see what's happening in the world right now, if you don't come to court, you're in big trouble. And so to continue to use the courts to compel this person that you're abusing to come and present themselves for whatever reason that they could be filing it. And oftentimes they use the children of this relationship to continue that through through custody proceedings and the like.
You know, for those who may still be asking, when you think about survivors, and they may say, well, why don't you play them at their own game? Why don't you use the courts as well? Can you talk a little bit how that disempowerment plays into not also empowering survivors as well?
Absolutely. You know, I will say that I, was very naive coming into my situation because I felt like, no court is going to believe this. I'll be okay. But I soon learned that there is this bias that is deeply embedded within the court system. For example, they may appoint a guardian ad litem that's an attorney for a child to determine, what home is going to be best suited for this child. And I find that women women and femmes are judged more harshly than, say, men. Where they may have the same kind of, say the house is messy. Well, they may say to the woman, well, her house is messy. She doesn't keep a clean house. But to the guy, they may be like, oh, he's working so hard to take care of the kids. He can't keep all this together. Let's give him some grace. And so we see kind of this deeply embedded bias. And also, I was under the impression that, women, if you're moms, if you're doing a good job, you're not gonna have that issue. You're gonna be able to keep your child. This is just frivolous. Wherein the courts oftentimes still treat children as property and women as property as well. And so those are things that my eyes were open to. And kind of realizing that the systems that were set in place that we think are in place to assist us are sometimes not the best places to receive the care we need.
On that topic of receiving care, there are many studies, a lot of research when we look at things like the National Institute of Health, for instance. They talk about the need for social supports and how important that is on not just the psychological, but also the physiological well-being of those who may be survivors, dealing with various forms of trauma. There are two things that were discussed in this film. One was your partner, Ak, and where he was that huge social support for you and the family, but there's also the support that the two of you had to provide for your children, right, to help them. Could you talk, first of all, a little bit about the importance of where that social support between you and Ak came together first, and how you were able to take that and the two of you were able to provide that same support for your children?
Yeah, Ak, throughout all of this, has been my rock. And honestly, if I didn't have him, I really don't know where this all would have landed. He was kind of the voice of reason for me in particular, who wanted to follow like the law and do things all the way the right way. And then when there came to a point where it was our safety over what is supposed to be right, I had that voice to kind of encourage me to do what's best for our family. And so I listened to that. And also seeing that he was willing to actually help create a space for me and for the family that was safe and to keep us protected went a long way. And I was very and extremely blessed to have that, whereas I know that I work with people now who don't have any of that. And so because he was able to pour into me, I was able to be stronger for my children. And we could together inform our children on, this dynamic of intimate partner violence and how it was impacting our family.
One of the things you just hit on was actually going to be my next question. So you talked about the individuals that you help, that you support now. You actually you bail black mamas out of jail.
Absolutely.
And that's not just a metaphor, like you physically go in.
Yes.
So with that being said, you work a lot with survivors yourself, and you just mentioned those who because you may have people watching this and they feel inspired, but they may be thinking, well, I don't have that type of support, or justice is so strong and I don't have that strength. So when you look at the individuals that you work with, what does empowerment look like from a support standpoint?
Oh, wow. Let me tell you, I may look strong, but there was a time when I was laying on the police station's floor, crying. I could not be consoled. My mother was on one side of me, my father was on the other side of me, and there was nothing they could do to console me because I didn't have my son. So I've been all the way there, all the way there. But, I had to think about what was greater, and the safety of my children tops everything, right? And I'm no different from any other mama in the city or across the country. Safety of our children is paramount. And so it was that, the support, the social support, and using, drawing on, this is not what I want, but these are the things that I do want for my family. And visioning those things to help bring myself to the point where I could then care for myself, care for my family, and in turn use my story to help others where they may be low. We will soldier that. We know it's hard. We know it's heavy. It is designed to break you all the way down. It is designed to destroy you. An abuser wants to destroy you. Bottom line. And so when you have somebody who can stand in the gap for you, who can hold that for you for a little while until you can get up, and then we can help you up, and we can help you through whatever process it is. Say you got arrested, we're there, we bail you out. We're not just going to bail you out. We're going to do what's necessary to help keep you out. And so that's when we bring in our participatory defense team. That's when we talk to your attorney. That's when we, help build that social bio for the judge to look at, to know that you are more than the charges presented in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the kinds of things that we do, along with a bunch of mutual aid and other things that people need.
So at this time, we're going to open to questions from the audience. And I see that we have some here. Before we go into those, if you have not already, please take a moment to fill out our survey. We'd love to hear from you. And so without further ado, I'll get into the questions. There's one here. What has changed for you personally since sharing your personal, your powerful story?
I think I've told you this a little bit, but going through the process of creating this documentary was extremely healing. And what's changed for me is a weight. This story, my story, has been a weight. I feel more free than I ever have. And so that is what has personally changed for me.
Another question here is, can we talk about some ways, we were going to talk about this actually, that the average community member can show up for participatory defense, especially for folks who may themselves have trauma surrounding the criminal injustice system.
I think it's really important for that work to look and see who's doing that work and to join their efforts. In Kansas City, we definitely do that work. So we are, a place where you can get some training from so that you know what to do and how you should show up for people. And there's a community of support around that where you wouldn't have to show up alone to support somebody. There's oftentimes several of us showing up at court, or if it's virtual, we're popping on the virtual video with the judge just to say, hey, we're here to let you know we're a community organization. We're just showing up to be in support of this community member. So that's one way. Definitely want to be in community with the people who are doing the work and making sure that that entity is really centering those who are most impacted. To me, that is gold standard to be doing this work.
And I think to follow along with that and this question, for those who've experienced the trauma themselves surrounding the criminal injustice system, you as a change maker, you created Real Justice Network, and you don't simply bail them out, like you say, you keep them out.
Right.
Within Real Justice Network, I've seen myself how individuals who you've worked to support become a part of Real Justice Network, and they themselves pay it forward, give back, and they're change makers. So you have a real impact on them. What has it been like to see an individual you've worked to support move from the same place that you were in into a better place of healing and begin to move forward and support others themselves? What does that kind of look like? What has your experience been with that?
That is one of the most empowering things to witness and to be a part of. And to see that the work that you've done, our work as an organization, is really impacting the life of somebody for real. It's God's work, honestly. And helping people who were on that floor like I was get up and realize, you know what, I'm not going to let whatever this person is doing to me tear me down, destroy me, silence me. I have children. I have myself. And I'm going to build myself up. And look, I don't have to do it alone. I have a community of support. I have a survivor friend over here who went through exactly what I went through, or somebody over here who really relates to it. A Real Justice Network doesn't think I'm crazy because I do X, Y, Z. They know and understand safety protocols and why I do the things I do to keep myself safe. Where other organizations may, discipline even our community members for doing some of the things that keep them safe. So it's nothing like being with people who get it for real.
Just this, on the topic of DocuCourse, we talk about individuals having a better understanding of the issues out there, really understanding how the narrative, your perspective, shapes your actions and your belief systems around environments, people. When you think about the narrative of the black mamas and their children and families that you support, what is the narrative? What do you want people to understand and know about yourself, as well as the individuals that you support, in order to move forward and actually provide what is needed?
That we bring resilience with us. But we are up against a system of oppression that doesn't even want to recognize our humanity. And so it is incredibly hard in this space. That's one thing I want people to know. And again, because we are so resilient, we fight. We fight, we continue, we take care of each other, we create space. And so, you know, just know it's hard. It's incredibly difficult. We're talking about systems that are embedded with white supremacist culture. And we're bucking them. And we're going in those cages and grabbing at our people and providing safety. We are the Harriet Tubmans of our century.
You know, Justice, one of the things we always say is what we know or think we know shapes what we believe. Those beliefs shape our actions. And so with DocuCourse, first of all, I want to thank you for sharing your story. I believe exactly what you just said. You are definitely shaping the narrative. And the way you shape the narrative is definitely going to shape action. How do people find out more about Real Justice Network?
You're very welcome. Thank you for covering my story with such love and grace. And find us on Instagram, Facebook. We're out there on the socials. Real Justice Network. That's REALE Justice Network. Hit us up in the DMs. If you are a survivor in need of support, please, please, please reach out to us. We do have a healing and empowerment support group that we would like to invite you into. And for other people who just want to support our work and our organization, we have trainings that you can come to. We even have spaces where you can come out in the community with us and be a part of the work on the ground. So please, please just reach out to us.
Stories and strategies for change.
Yep.
And so we would like to again send a special thank you to our partners at the Help Forward Foundation, Convergence Partnership, and Assemble.fyi, and of course Real Justice Network here. Please follow DocuCourse. We're on all socials, DocuCourse, DocuCourse.org. We have many amazing stories to tell. And with that, please stay tuned here for a second to see the trailer for our next virtual session. Thank you all for joining us today.
He had a wife and 3 kids that was being evicted.
The next minute, he might be shooting at you. He might be swinging a hammer at you, or a 2x4.
It's important that the community understands the challenges of coming back, and you've already paid your debt to society.
I don't have to suffer for it no more, but I can share it so to avoid somebody else's suffering.
Get close enough to those that are dealing with their